The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
So another NRA edition of TechBytes, and I'm having a conversation with Patrick Yearout, who is the Director of Innovation at Ivar's Restaurants in Seattle.
Correct.
So welcome to the conversation here. We've talked many times, but we'll see where this one goes, right?
Thank you.
So first of all, why don't you give us the background of Ivar's and also your background?
Okay, well, Ivar's is a seafood concept based in Seattle. We have 3 full-service locations and 18 quick-service locations in and around, all over Puget Sound. We also operate a small chain of hamburger restaurants called Kid Valley. We have 4 of those. We have stands at local sports stadiums. So some Ivar, some Kid Valley, some other concepts. At like T-Mobile Park where the Mariners play, Lumen Field where the Seahawks play. And then we also have a manufacturing plant called the Ivar Soup Company that makes chowder and soups, not only for our restaurants, but we sell them to other restaurants and grocery stores, Costco, all across the country, and a little bit internationally as well.
That would have been my question. It's interesting, by the way, in the seafood industry. I was friends with the people that had Legal Seafood, and they did the same thing. They started, I guess, as a grocery store. I forget what it was, but then they started having fish hatcheries, and they did all kinds of different things. The same.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's actually another company in Seattle called Tutabella, and they started off as a pizza company, and they were like 100% restaurants. And now they've done so well in the grocery side of things. Their goal is to get to 80% grocery and only 20% restaurants. So it's interesting how things evolve over the years when it comes to.
It's funny you mentioned pizza, though. There, I believe, was one of the pizza restaurants is the one who's behind the pizza vending machines.
Oh.
And I think they're out of there as well because I saw it at the Hyatt Regency there. But, Seattle is a very interesting place because it's a tech hub, for sure. Yep. And then as a restaurant company, you guys are really at the heart of the restaurant scene as a real favorite.
It is. We have a lot of great restaurant companies that have been around for a long time. I mean, we've been around since 1938. I think a lot of people know Dick's Drive-In, which has been around for a very long time as well. There's a lot in the seafood market as well.
Sure.
I mean, Anthony's and Duke's Chowder House, and there's a lot of really great food in town. And so we're blessed with some very nice weather.
And there's a lot of good coffee.
And a lot of good coffee too.
In town too, right?
Yeah. We're blessed with a lot of nice weather from May to September, and that's when all the visitors come to town. We get all the cruise ship passengers, and they come to town to try a lot of the restaurants too.
So how long have you been at Ivar's?
I will be there. It'll be 26 years next month. So 26 years. Before that, I owned and operated a sandwich store in Edmonds, Washington, and I did that for 7 years. And so grand total of 33 years in the restaurant.
So you came out of operations, but somehow you end up in technology. So how's that?
Well, yes.
Excuse me, not technology, innovation.
Yes. So I started off when I came to Ivar's, I was a restaurant manager, and I did that for a few years, and I got into training and started to do that for a while. And then I added recruiting to the list. In 2008, our HR director retired, and I split up some of the duties with somebody else, and I got recruiting. And so at first, recruiting in 2008, 2009 was a piece of cake because the industry, the recession was happening. We could put a one sentence ad in Craigslist and gets 100 people to apply. So then I started doing that, and then slowly around 2016, 2017, I became more involved with the IT side of things and began working with our IT department.
Good time to be in IT, by the way.
Yes. There's a lot.
Who would know how important IT would become, right?
Well, again, when I first started in restaurants in 1992, I mean, we had a cash register that we bought at Costco. And that was like the most sophisticated thing.
You sell seafood to Costco.
We do.
Chowder.
But that was the most sophisticated thing we had. And all it did was ring up orders. We didn't even have an automated credit card machine at that time. So technology was not something I was thinking about back then. But certainly it is, even though we are a people-focused industry, and we're about hospitality and making our guests feel welcome and appreciated. There is a reliance on technology that is so important. And I mean, if you were to lose all your technology and you come in the next morning, very few restaurants would be able to open.
It used to be if you lost your pilot light, if anybody
Yes.
knows what a pilot light
Yes.
is, okay.
Yes.
If you lost that, you couldn't cook, you couldn't do anything.
No.
Today, you lose your technology, you're really stuck because people aren't trained to know those prices, the
Right.
menu items, and all the different
If you
things that
got
are
one
there,
of
right?
those manual imprinter credit card machines with, the knuckle busters that you would run over the card, most people today would not know how to use those for sure.
So you're in a rather interesting environment given the types of operations that you have. Because you said you're in manufacturing, you have QSR through the burgers, you have the full service restaurants, but you also are catering to cruise ships and big groups.
We
right?
do. We do a lot of banquets.
And you had grocery somewhere in there,
Yes,
right?
from the chowder plant as well.
So does the technology, translate across all those different things? Or do you buy them in silos?
It is a little bit of both. Some stuff that we use across everything, like HR, we use Talent Reef, for example, for hiring and recruiting. That translates to everywhere. But then individually, the different divisions have different technologies to meet, the needs of their particular business.
So you are buying, let's call it a best of breed for the different business lines?
Yes, each division has a division director, and in some cases they make independent decisions based on what's best for them. And it just works out better that way.
Is it really independent, or at some point does it have to integrate, or there's some guardrails or certain rules of the road that at least they have to follow?
There are rules of the road, but I mean, there are certain things like, for example, full service has reservations. They take reservations.
Sure.
We don't do that in quick service. We don't do that in the stadium. So what works for them...
I've had reservations about quick service sometimes.
It's irrelevant for the other operations. So in that case, we only have to make the decision. And then, of course, there's more technologies in terms of inventory for the Ivar Soup Company that are not relevant for the other divisions. So,
but at the end of the day, does it all report back to a centralized back office or a accounting system?
Yeah, we do have an IT department who and I work with him to kind of keep track of everything and keep the relationships up with our vendor reps, which takes a lot of work as well.
Okay, so now you just brought up a new subject here.
Okay.
So you said you have an IT department, you work with them.
Yes.
So what then is the definition of innovation?
Well, it's more like a title that means I do a lot of different things, because I do work with some IT stuff and I manage a lot of the vendor relationships. I also do recruiting and training. And
So you didn't give up any of those things that you picked up along the way.
I also do, I work a little bit with marketing and a little bit with HR as well. So the innovation is more like, I'm lucky enough to come to shows like this, the National Restaurant Association show. I also belong to CHART, the Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers, and I try to bring back ideas that will work for different departments.
So that's interesting. So now you're going to have to remind me. Did
Okay.
we actually meet through IT or did we meet through CHART?
That is a good question. I think we met the first time at the show.
But was it with CHART, who participates with the IFBTA and
think
things,
it
right?
was that. I
So
think it
that
was
is a interesting perspective, because a lot of people don't know what CHART is, but the Council on Hotel and Restaurant Trainers.
Right.
And it's a very interesting thing because it's HR, but it's training, and they use a lot of technology tools in those areas. I had this conversation last night with CHART's CEO, and we were talking about this, that there's so many different ways. And I learned last night something new about CHART, that they're actually focused on data security and cybersecurity. I'm like, and that's coming up at CHART?
It does. Technology has affected the training side of things as much as it's affected the operation side of things. So the way that people get information these days, back when I first started, it was, you would read the manual, everything was in the manual, and you would read that for hours on end. But that's not how people learn these days. They want it in shorter bites. They want it digitally on their phone. They want it instantaneously. And so technology has made a lot of that possible. And so when it comes to, yes, we're talking in training about vendor management. We're talking about AI. We're talking about data security as well, because it all affects what we do in training too.
Are you using these tools?
We do, yes, certainly at Ivar's in various ways. And if you ask any of the members of Chart, I'm sure they've been making inroads with it as well.
Right, but at Ivar's, is the company fully embraced it? I mean, look, I know where you're located, and I know you come to all the tech conferences, and actually your owners and leadership
Right,
do as
they
well.
do as well.
So they're very interested in that. But does the company really fully embrace, and the operators and the people in the units fully embrace tech? Are you a tech-forward company? Not to put you on the spot,
No.
but some people,
Yes, I would say we're getting there. How about that? There are some things that we've fully embraced, like hiring and recruiting, and all that is done through technology. I would say there's very few people that come into our restaurants to apply anymore. Most of them are finding out about us online.
Well, even the hospitality schools, a lot of people don't go recruiting in the schools anymore.
Right.
They have to be found online.
They have to be found online. So that is a big part of it. Payroll is done, through technology. Reservations are done through technology. Online feedback is done through technology. There's so many things that, when I started 26 years ago, that were all done on paper. And now it's done all through the computers or the tech.
So a lot of times, although I have conversations with people at all kinds of conferences, big and small, down to, single units, right? But you're right there in the number of units you have as a small to medium multi-unit operator in multi-divisions, so multi-segments. But your company, what year was it? 1943? What year was it you were founded?
1938.
38, okay.
Yes.
So you have a reputation, you are founded on a culture, and you have a history. And there's been a lot of conversation about how technology is taking that culture away, and including how people interact with their guests, but also with their employees. So how do you keep your culture, within your company by using the technology tools and not allowing it to take it away?
I think you still, again, even though we have all this technology that's to help make our jobs easier and better, there's still a people aspect to what we do, and it's little things like, yes, if you have an announcement, let's say you're changing something, you're changing your app, or you're changing your POS or whatever. Yes, you can send an email out to the stores, and you can let them know in an email. You can post something on the bulletin board, but it's so much more powerful if you get your senior leaders out into the restaurants. Your district manager, your regional manager, your director, even our company president, Bob, who get them out and have them meet with the employees face to face, and spend time with them, and answer their questions, be available.
Do the employees, okay, I don't know generationally, but when you're a company that has a history like yours, you're going to have employees who've been there for a while.
Yes.
And then you're going to have new employees too, right?
Right.
So do they interact differently?
I don't think so. I think everybody likes to feel appreciated, and I think everybody likes that personal contact. We're very blessed in that our entire operation is within 3 counties in Washington State, one right after another. So even though we have a lot of different things going on, we're all very close together. And so we do try to get out to the restaurants as much as we can and spend time with people. And that's how you build the culture. The technology helps, along the way. But as long as you keep making those visits, and even Bob, he was at one of the, he goes to the, works at the stadiums a couple of times a week or a couple of times a month.
He just wants to see games.
Yeah, well, that's true. But he does spend time there, and people know him. And when you get out and you meet your crew, I think it's so important.
Absolutely.
When you get out, you can spend your time up in the ivory tower and making decisions, but there's so much more better, they work out so much better, and you get so much more buy-in when you're out in the field talking to your employees, even if it's something like a uniform redesign. You involve the employees in that decision so that they can feel like they're a part of it, and
well, let's come back to that in a minute. We'll take a break,
okay,
and then we'll come back and continue that discussion. So with Patrick Yearout, and he's the director of innovation at Ivar's, and we'll be right back.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So welcome back. So Patrick Yearout and I are having a conversation. Not really. We've been talking about Ivars and their history and how to do it and how to connect. And there are so many things you just threw out there. And how do you started talking about it right before the break. You started talking about how even uniform selection and getting people involved. Well, a lot of people when they're looking at technology don't involve the people in the line.
Oh, my goodness.
So what would your advice be, or what are your learnings as far as how to make technology successful when there's so many different things that people are looking at?
Well, I think it's really important to ask the end users, and a lot of times, especially if it's something like a POS system, you're getting a new POS, the best thing you can do is ask your employees, because many of them have worked at a lot of different places.
Right.
They know the system. They know the little idiosyncrasies that you're not going to hear about, when you're getting the sales pitch from the vendor.
Right.
And they're going to know, oh, yeah, we tried that one at this other place and this never worked well. So they are just incredible sources of information. So we always start with the employees when we're talking about those sorts of things. We also talk to other managers and in other industries. I know this sounds kind of counter to, competition and everything, but
people in our industry share information and helps each other, right?
We belong to an HR roundtable with probably 40 or 45 different other restaurants in the Seattle area, and we're always sharing information. Bob knows everybody. Our company president knows everybody in town. And so when there is something that we're considering, we ask around to our colleagues, or we ask at the Seattle Restaurant Alliance or the Washington Hospitality Association, because they also have been users of other systems.
Or the IFBTA.
Or the IFBTA as well. Sure.
Yeah, make sure we get that in there.
But we're all very supportive of one another, because when we do better, the whole industry does better. And so, there's just so much information out there that you can get from personal recommendations from your employees, from your colleagues, from the associations that you're members of.
So are there some things that you think that our industry should be doing better as it relates to technology?
I think there's a preconceived notion that in some cases that technology is there to replace employees. And I've never looked at it that way.
I've been asked that question a lot, especially when you talk about robotics, or you talk AI, right, and voice AI and things. Okay.
And I just think, at least for me personally, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Ivars, but I have been there for 26 years. We're not looking for technology that is there to replace people. We are looking for technology that is there to support our people, help our people, make them more productive, and just make their jobs better. So I think there's that notion that it's out there.
It always seems to be that notion.
Yes.
That's there. But actually what people seem to miss is that there's all these new opportunities and there's new ways of doing business and new distribution points and new revenue centers.
Right.
And so those are all adding business as well.
They can be. Yeah.
I mean, look, you guys are talking about doing, I guess, the pop-ups and the sports arenas and things like that. Those are new revenue opportunities. You're doing grocery and you're doing things like, so there's many new opportunities that are out there, and delivery certainly, was one of those new areas too.
Online ordering and delivery, we were just barely dipping our toe into the water before the pandemic. I think we had one location that did delivery, and because we didn't think anybody would want fish and chips, because it, delivered, because it's so much better.
I like fish and chips.
Right, but it's so much better when it's right out of the fryer, right? And then the pandemic happened, and we're like, okay, we gotta figure out another way to get it to our guests. And shockingly, it turned out to be a very healthy part of our business and a revenue stream that, we count on now.
So what is the secret? So I haven't really thought about this. So, the definition of technology is really sort of an interesting thing, because I sat next to a guy a couple nights ago and he's in packaging.
Okay.
Right? And actually, he decided the food service industry is a good place because he does the packaging for drugs, for CVS and people, and how they secure them and how they send them. I sort of got it, right? And I started to think about this. Well, gosh, I mean, fish and chips. delivered and what we're talking about here, the chips and the fish, and they have to be, if you want them fresh and you want them crispy, how do you do that? That's a technology. It's not technology, right?
It is, yes, because it's the technology of the box that you use, really, or how the,
Did you change your boxes for this?
We have, yeah. Well, we sort of had to, because back in the day we used to use styrofoam, and unfortunately...
Well, and that's one of those things as well.
I mean, I love styrofoam. Styrofoam was cheap, and it was not flimsy. It would never crush, and it kept everything fresh. But unfortunately, it just turns out to be terrible for the earth. So, but boy, do I miss styrofoam. But we had to move on to other things and find boxes and packaging that would not only look nice,
right,
but also keep everything in a state that would be good for travel.
Well, but people sort of miss it, that's really part of the whole picture, right? And what about like cooking methods and, are you doing things with like connected kitchens, with energy management, with food safety, temperature?
We're doing a few things. We just added, we started using a company called Rescue.
Oh, sure, I know who they are.
And we've digitized our maintenance projects. So anytime there's something breaks down, there's a QR code, the manager scans it, it goes right to our maintenance team, and if they can't fix it, it goes right to an outside vendor. But in addition to that, we added sensors in all of our refrigerators, and coolers and freezers. So every cooler and freezer in our full service and quick service operations has a sensor in it now. So if it strays from where it's supposed to be, it sends an alert to the manager.
Are you also connected with your cooking equipment and things to know when there's failure rates or things?
Not yet, but that is something where we are working towards.
And I would think, though, that, first of all, you're in a interesting segment as well because you do so much seafood, which has a lot of variable pricing and sourcing and, all kinds of different parts in it. So how does that add complexity to, what you need to bring together?
Well, fortunately, most of our, we get a lot of seafood from the same sources. So we work with like Alaskan Leader, who gets a lot of our seafood from right up in Alaska. And so...
It's just up the river, right?
Just up the river, yes, from Seattle. So that hasn't been too hard. I would say, we've had a few tariff situations going on. We were getting our oil from Canada, so we had to, switch oil distributors there for a minute. But overall, it's not been too bad.
Well, people sort of lose that nuance as well, but also a lot of the product that you're sourcing is coming from outside the U.S. but also you have the freshness, the quality. There's a whole bunch of different things.
There's a lot to consider. Yeah, and just even the prep styles and because some of the food is made differently in full service than it is in quick service too. So.
Well, you certainly have that challenge. So, walking around the show here, this obviously the tech area has expanded here. Is there some new tech or something that you did not expect to see here?
I was surprised how many, because I guess when we first started getting really into technology, like, 10 years ago or so, it felt like everything was focused on one thing. Like this company did tipping and this company did, tracking guest counts or whatever.
Best of breed.
Yes, exactly. And now it feels like everybody's moving towards we do everything.
So is that because we bought everything, we integrate with everything, or it's easy for us to just make everything happen?
I think it's the latter there. It's just easier for us to make everything happen.
So they're developing it themselves.
That's what it feels like to me, at least, is that as you go around and talk to the different companies, and for example, we use Toast for our POS system, and they're adding more and more services, and it just feels like a lot of you're going to have to pick one eventually to do everything rather than integrate a bunch of smaller companies.
Well, I don't know. You talk to the Toast people, they have 240 integrations, used to be 140 integrations, but everybody wants to integrate with everybody in there, but yet they also have their own products. So I think it depends maybe on your size, or not everybody can afford to replace everything all at once. Or one of the challenges is not everybody's good for QSR to full service, right?
True.
So I think there are differentiations in that. I think there's also a debate as to where the center of the restaurant universe is. Some people will still say it's point of sale. Some people say it's back office because of connectivity. And I suppose some people will say it's up in the cloud because everything's connected in the cloud.
Yeah, it was, again, very different than when I first started in the industry and we had, a calculator was the fanciest thing we had. So, but yeah, it's crazy when you see like some of the automation, not necessarily here in the tech part, but over in the equipment part. And how connected the equipment is to everything these days.
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring that up because before I came down here, I took a walk over the equipment. I was talking with Ecolab and I was looking at Middleby. And I'd learned, I say this all the time, that if the device has a digital screen on it, it can communicate.
Right.
But what I've also learned is how proprietary and siloed a lot of the equipment manufacturers are, that they only are communicating with their own equipment. And even when they're showing that when they have connected things, it's only connected with their devices. And the other side of that is they don't think how much data there is and how much they can help the operator out with all that data, because half the time when you ask them, it's because they want to know failure rates and they want to, improve the thing, not run out of something. But I said, well, you could be doing trends with that. And it's like, you almost need somebody to pull that data together from them and put it in a different source, because that's not how they look at it.
And data is where the value is when it comes to technology, especially, guest data, sales data, any of that stuff, anything that you can own or keep outside of, there's some vendors that you work with that are still kind of stingy about that and will lock everything behind a proprietary wall. But the good ones are the ones that are able to share that with you and provide value for your organization.
So in your space, of the medium-sized operators, multi-unit, is there something that you believe that the independents really should be spending more time focusing on that they're not?
I would say it's not, for me at least, it's not so much that there's a technology that I wish for, but it's working with the vendors that we work with. There are individual things about each vendor that I'm like, if I were in charge of that company, I'd be like, this is the thing I would fix, because it kind of drives me a little bit crazy.
But they ask you.
They ask me and I tell them, but it still doesn't get fixed.
But isn't the speed of change and fixing things a lot quicker than it used to be? You used to have to be on a roadmap.
Yes, it can be, especially if you can show them what the value is from the guest perspective. Yes.
So do you lead the way in helping them to see the value within your segments?
I try to do that, yes. And like I said, there are certain things that I think are so obvious and should change. And I don't want to give you any specific examples and tell you all the secrets or whatever, but
your secrets or somebody else's secrets?
Somebody else's secret. It's just there are certain ways that things are done, and I think we have a certain perspective because we're in the restaurant industry and they're a tech company, and they don't always see things from the restaurant operator perspective. So if I can share that and show them how this is important to the restaurant industry, I'm always going to take the opportunity to do that.
So that's an interesting thing. You can look around the room here and you can see the number of companies that actually started by restaurateurs. There are a bunch that started. Then there are ones who started as contract development houses for a restaurateur, and all of a sudden, because it was a big restaurateur, they become a restaurant company, right? And then you have the startups, of which there's a hall over here that has a bunch of people. The most interesting thing I find with them is when I find out they're a startup, my next question might be, are you come from the industry? And if they say yes or no, my next question is, what was the inspiration behind this? Like, how'd you come up with that idea? And it's very interesting to hear how they came up with the idea. Sometimes they were in some other business,
right,
and they said, why can't this industry do that? We see a need. Sometimes it's because they just sit on a bar somewhere and they're talking to the bartender who says, God, I wish the system would just do this, right?
One of the questions I always ask when we're interviewing vendors, especially tech vendors, is who on your staff has worked in the restaurant industry? Because I want to know if they have that perspective.
Well, that's never going to happen talking to you, because we're just going to say, who on your staff has worked in every single job and runs this whole company in everything in, the restaurant industry? They're just going to point to you and they're going to say, this guy's been around long enough so he does everything, right?
I've had the opportunity to do a lot of different things in our.
But that really gives you a lot of perspective.
It does. And I, like I said, I think, I understand what it's like to be a manager. I understand what it's like to be an employee. I understand what it's like when you are, have a shift that is completely in the weeds, and how stressful that can be.
Do you work shifts still sometimes?
I haven't in a while. It's been.
So you put your CEO out in the stadium, but you just sit in the ivory tower. Is that what you just said?
No. I do when I can. But when you have 10 jobs, it's not always easy to get out.
When you have 10 jobs, all right. So I sort of get that. I sort of get that thing. So. You go to a lot of industry events. Mm-hmm. Now, that's sort of fortunate for you, because I see you all kinds of things. Not everybody gets to do that. But what are your favorite events during the year?
I like the restaurant show. I always have a good time here. It was nice this year too, because some of our operators came, and it was nice to walk the halls with them and talk about what they were
seeing. Is it eye-opening for them?
It is, especially for our regional manager, because he's never been to the show before. So he didn't know what to expect.
It's a little bit overwhelming, isn't it?
It is. And then, especially when you're walking down this hall and you get to what you think is the end, and you're like, oh my goodness, there's an entire other room.
And I think that room is going to keep growing.
It's crazy.
Fortunately, they have the space to do it.
Yes. I also go to FS Tech. Been to FS Tech several times, and it's
and Chart.
And Chart as well, yes. And I like Chart and FS Tech because they're a little more intimate. The vendor gallery.
Well, they're very focused on the subject matter too, right?
And it's not. I don't get 25,000 steps at Chart or FS Tech, but you get a little bit more time with the vendors, a little bit deeper conversations.
Well, that's true. And it is difficult in a real trade show. I think the difference between a trade show and a conference, and then the networking time, there's so many events going on here to try to get to. If you only have one,
I got 5 dinners tonight, or this.
Well, I'm telling you, you got 5 dinners on the floor, but it's really a lot, that's here. I always find it interesting, and I will tell you, to come to this, because sometimes when you are siloed in technology or what might be considered tech, I actually like looking at new food products. Kitchen equipment I do consider tech. But
I do too.
To try to understand, I even enjoy, which is sort of an odd thing, getting to talk with the association people and hearing what the legislative issues are, because a lot of them, when they're being pushed onto the industry, especially at the state level, there's a technology solution that may be able to help them out.
Yes, we certainly face that in Seattle. It's been 8 years now. They started doing secure scheduling in Seattle. So we have to give a schedule to our employees 2 weeks in advance. If we need to change the schedule, we have to pay them more. There's a certain amount of rest. And there's a lot of parts to that there's a lot of parts to that law. It's very, very complicated. And
when these laws are put together, they don't really think about how you're going to deliver on it.
That's a challenge, but what makes it really frustrating is that they give you the law, but they don't give you any tools to to make the law easy. If you ask them, they'll say, "Oh, well, just write it all down," and you're like, "Well, you don't really have time to write it all down," And it would be nice if there was a technology solution that they could present along with the law.
Well, that's not their job.
It is not their job. But if we're trying to be a partnership and we're trying to build something together, it would be great if, in addition to all these rules, that there could be a tool that would make it administratively possible at the same time.
Well, that's certainly
it's maybe too pie in the sky.
That always is a challenge. So, all right. So look, there's food here. There's other things here. So, what's your favorite booth to go visit?
Well, I missed them this year. The Nathan's Famous.
Oh my gosh!
Here. And the
everybody's saying that.
The Vienna beef.
Vienna beef and Nathan's hot dogs. I'm telling you, there's a message out there. By the way, so I heard a rumor that Vienna beef is back next year.
Oh,
I don't know about Nathan's yet.
Okay.
But Vienna beef is back.
I'm starving to death.
Everybody says that because that's on the tech side of the building, right? Oh my God.
It's like the first thing I would go to.
Wisconsin cheese is okay.
They're good. I had their ice cream yesterday. I'll go back again today.
Any good seafood restaurants? I mean, seafood, you know.
I haven't seen any of our suppliers here.
I saw a booth I walked by that had big fish in it.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't seen that one yet, so
Okay,
I'll have
there
to
you
give
go.
it a try. But yes, there's so much good food there. You know, and that's the hard part is you eat and eat all day long, and then you're supposed to go to 5 dinners at night, and you're like,
Well, I get that, right, but it's just little nibbles. Well, look, it's been great having the conversation.
Thank you.
As you walk the rest of the show, send me a text message if you see something good. I might take a walk for
Okay.
it to get those steps in, right,
Okay.
to see what's here. But, Patrick, thank you very much for joining us,
Thank
sharing
you
the
for having me.
perspective. The Seattle seafood burger chowder
a little bit of
stadium
everything.
perspective,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
A little bit of everything. Well, that's because you're into everything.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us on
Thank you.
TechBytes.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.